how the events unfolded in their economy, which subsequently led to building of this out of proportion crisis. Now, Greece as a nation joined the European Union in 1981. Now, the European Union was earlier known as the European Economic Community, where you had these 10 nations at the time when Greece joined this European Union in 1981. It was the 10th member of EU, and it was in the year 1999 that euro was launched as the common currency for all the European Union members. Now, however, the conditions to adopt euro were very strict at that point of time, and some kind of concealing of information was done by the Greece government to uh, enter into that elite club of the members with euro as their currency. And after a lot of effort, Greece was finally able to join this euro as take euro as their currency. Earlier, it was drachma, which was the currency of Greece. Now, in 2001, finally, ultimately, the euro was adopted as the currency of Greece. Now, if we move back in time, what happened in Greece was earlier it was under military rule. After being in military rule for around 8 years, in the year 1981, socialist government came to power. Now, when the socialist government came to power, and alternatively from that year 1981 to 2000s, alternatively there were socialist government or democratic governments in power, and all of them were coming up with pleasing policies for the voters. Now, by pleasing policies, I mean that to keep the voters happy, the economy, the government expenditure is increased a lot beyond a point that can be supported by the financial system or the economic system. So, this was unsustainable expenditure which the government was incurring. And if I give you examples, the government was very generous. uh, Working women were allowed to retire as early as 50. Working men could retire with conditions at 58. So pension expenditure as a percentage of GDP increased a lot. Apart from that, the rule was that salaries will increase every year for the public sector workers, and no importance was given to their performance or productivity. What actually was very infamous kind of practice that was followed was that instead of 12-month payment to the workers, 13-month or 14-month payment was given. So, which means 12-month you are working, you are getting the payment for that. In December, for meeting the holiday expenses, additional 1 month payment was given. And then ha- in many cases, or in some of the years, even 14-month payment was given, which meant 12 month आपको अपने काम के लिए payment मिल रही है. After that, 1 month for Christmas, and half month payment at the time of Easter, and half month payment was given to meet holiday expenses. So you can imagine the kind of financial support that was given by the government to the workers. And with this, there were other factors at play in the economy. The biggest being there was a lot of tax evasion, low productivity, competitiveness was falling because you are being given salaries, additional salaries, incremental salaries every year without any valuation or appraisal of your work. And there was rampant tax evasion. And what happened was now the debt started building up for the government. Now, at the time when Greece entered the European Union, the fundamentals were still good. But what happened over the years is because of these populist policies of the government, the debt or the budget deficit started increasing. Now, if you have a look at the point here, the between 2001 and 2008, the real GDP growth averaged 3.9% per year. So, what happened was after Greece entered the European Union with the adoption of Euro in 2001. So, Eurozone जो था, उसमें Greece entered in 2001, and now it became very easy for the government to borrow money. The credibility of the economy increased. Investors who treated Greece as a middle income country with poor governance were now ready to give loan to the country. So investors began lending to Greece, and what you will be surprised is that this was at the same rate as they were lending to Germany, which was the strongest economy until date also, a very strong economy in the European Union, and the rates which were given were the same. Now, what happened is the government started getting a lot of funding, but these funds were again used by the government for making all these projects and further increasing the deficit in the economy. Now, after this, what happened is because of regular inflow of funds, the economy started booming, though the fundamentals were weak. But since investors were placing confidence in the economy started booming. Now, this growth was unsustainable because जब आपके fundamentals ही नहीं strong, इतना massive टैक्स इवेजन हो रहा था इकोनॉमी में और डेफिसिट बिल्ड होता जा रहा था, तो कहीं ना कहीं ब्रेक लगनी थी ग्रोथ में. एंड दिस हैपेंड as early as 2000. The debt to GDP ratio was 103%. Now, fiscal deficit was also high. So, at the time, Greece had not entered the Eurozone. Actually, I told you that in 2001, to enter that Eurozone, Greece concealed a lot of information under the Maastricht Treaty. Now, problem came to the forefront when the global financial crisis, the US global financial crisis started, and then came the Greece financial crisis. By this time, things were still going, at least going for the economy. They were in motion for the economy. But 2008 US financial crisis, which started with which actually passed on to the other nations through the Lehman Brothers collapse, led to a number of bank failures in Europe. uh, also there were many bailout programs which were launched by individual nations. And at this point of time, what happened was people started or investors started withdrawing money from the market. So now for Greece, additional financing had ended. There were no fresh inflows. Along with that, the investors were withdrawing the money they had invested. So now Greece was not able to pay interest on the debt it had taken. In 2009, that is 1 year after the onset of subprime crisis, the budget deficit was more than 15% of the GDP of the economy. So from 3.7% in 2000, now in 2009, the deficit was 15%. Now, also because of all these reasons, the bond market demand जो थी Greek bonds की, that also fell. Now, I'll with an example. You being finance students, you need to understand that there is a yield spread. Now, yield spread is, I think, one of these slides I have given some intro to yield spread. It's not here, but I'll tell you with example that how the yield spread in the uh, Greece, in Greece, it first narrowed down and then it again spread a lot. The spread टाइम टाइमलाइन के साथ बताती हूँ. In 2001, Greece entered the Eurozone. Now, prior to this, the yield spread was very high. Now, in the yield spread between the 10-year Greek bonds and same 10-year German bonds, we see the comparison between the return which was offered on 10-year Greek bonds and 10-year German bonds. Now, in 90 till 1998, the difference was around 6%, 600 basis point. 600 basis point, each basis point is 0.01% or 1 by 100. So this was 6%. And now when Greece joined the Eurozone, this fell to 50 basis point. So the yield on the bonds, it converged. Now the economy was moving with the stronger economies of the European zone. But when the GDP deficit started increasing, started mounting by January 2012, the spread between the same bonds, 10-year Greek bonds and German bonds, has widened to 3,300 basis point, which means 33% was the difference between the return offered on Greek bonds and German bonds of the same duration. So that was the kind of shambles the economy was in. Furthermore, in 2009, the the political parties at the center had announced that the budget deficit would be 12.9% of the GDP. Now, the European Union had a budget deficit upper limit of 3%. That is why, if you recall, जो ग्रीस को टाइम लगा एंटर करने में यूरो जोन वाज बिकॉज ऑफ सच कंडीशंस which were imposed on the member nations. So here, Greece was standing at 12.9% deficit as compared to the required 3% deficit. Now, this meant that the rating of the nation was downgraded by the bigger credit rating agencies like Fitch, Moody's, S&P. Now, once a nation is downgraded, additional inflows in the nation will again be limited, and the cost of future loans also increases. Now, in 2010, the government announced that they will lower the GDP. They are taking steps towards the same, and by the next year or in a year or two, they will be able to lower the deficit to 3%. Now, after this announcement, again in 1 year, the economy declared that they are on the verge of default and they need help. So this meant that by this year, they needed help from external sources. External sources means यूरोपियन यूनियन, IMF, यहाँ से अब उन्होंने बेल आउट पैकेजेस डिमांड करना शुरू कर दिया. Now, 4 months later, they announced that they are about to fall. And debt to GDP ratio, you can just imagine that in 2011, this was as high as 180%. So, in spite of things going wrong from the starting of 2000, Greece organized Olympics in 2004. They were under a lot of government expenditure and populist government थी, public borrowing increase हो रही थी, and by 2011 the government had a budget deficit of 180%. Now, the factors were playing in the background, and the European Union was more than concerned with this development, and bailout package was announced for Greece. Now, यहाँ पर एक term आती है which is troika. Troika is the three main organizations which helped in bailout of the Greek economy, and there was not a single bailout. There have been three bailout packages for Greece. So IMF, EU, and European Union Central Bank. These three formed the troika, which extended the bailout to Greece economy, and the biggest contributor in terms of funds or lending has been Germany. So again, if you read in detail, this is again a very critically analyzed decision as to why Germany has given so much of lending to Greece over the years, or for the rescue packages. Why has Germany been more than eager? तो इसमें एक reason ये भी बोला जाता है कि इवन जर्मनी में बहुत ज़्यादा गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर है. So as to avoid uh, uh, scrutiny on their work in Germany, extended funds to Greece, and then to make its economy more competitive for exports and all. There are multiple criticism of this decision of Germany to be one of the major lenders to Greece economy. But anyways, the bailout started in 2010. Now, whenever a government is or offered bailout, it comes at a number of requirements. So there is always a cost to a bailout. So the cost was the austerity drive or austerity measures which were required by European Union and IMF. And the first and foremost requirement under these measures was that you have to reduce the public expenditure. So now tax was to be increased, tax loopholes were to be closed, reduce the incentives for early retirement, cut pensions by 1% of the GDP, reduce the wages, privatize some state-owned funds. So all these were the requirements of these austerity drives. Now, कोई भी government जब इस austerity इस type की austerity drive का part बनती है, then there is a lot of opposition not only from the political parties but also from the government from the public at large. So which meant at this point of time when the government was taking subsequent bailouts, and now the government suddenly started reducing the expenditure. By this time half of the Greek households, they were actually relying on the pension income. So the age or the average age of the population there was quite high, and one of five person in Greece were above the age of 65. So now people were in a jeopardy. Now they didn't know that how will they meet the additional expenses. One, the current workers were now paying for the pension of the seniors because additional taxes were imposed. Government was reducing its spending. The unemployment rate, it increased to 25%, और जो youth unemployment थी वो 50% तक पहुंच गई. During these years there were riots, there were violent protests, and now what people wanted was any government which will take them away from this austerity drive. So, since the crisis fully exploded in 2010, there have been three bailout packages and four different governments. क्योंकि अब क्या हो रहा था, जो भी गवर्नमेंट इस एजेंडा के साथ आ रही थी कि that they will bring end to the austerity drive, that government was elected by the population there. So obviously, when they came to the power, they knew that they cannot move without the bailout or austerity measures. फिर भी रखने पड़ेंगे in place, otherwise the economy would not grow. So in 2015, when one of this kind came to the center, Syriza party करके party आई on the promise that they will stop all the austerity measures. With this, when this party came to a center, they missed out on the debt repayment schedule. Now, again, IMF intervened. Again, more funds were provided by IMF, and austerity measures had to be continued. There were bank runs where people were not allowed, or there were restrictions on the ATM withdrawals. So people, public at large, could not withdraw more than 60 euros per day. and there were huge lines outside the ATMs. Uh, Tourism was hit. Now, one of the major sources of income, around 20% of the GDP of Greece comes through tourism. So that was also at risk. So now what happened is a fresh bailout came and things started getting better with the policies, austerity measures in place. Now, by 2018, the economy had shown a lot of improvement. तो जो थर्ड बेल आउट पैकेज था उसके बाद इकोनॉमी ने प्रॉपर ग्रोथ शो करी है. New bonds have been issued in the global market, and today if we talk about the position of this economy, of the Greek economy, what we find is that in 2015 14 itself, some growth came in, but it declined in 15 and 16. 2017 onwards, modest growth आ गई थी economy में, and then it continued in 17, 18, 19. Then we were all hit by the pandemic. Greek economy again was hit hard, and it contracted by 9%. But now, if I talk about the latest figures, then the economy posted a strong growth of 16.6% in the second quarter and 13.4% in the third quarter of 2021. So things seem to be better. However, the austerity measures are still in place. And if you have a look at the last line, Greece has paid only 41.6 million billion euros, and at this rate, their scheduled debt payments are going beyond 2060. So, faulty government policies, unfair practices, tax evasion, all this collectively led to the collapse of the Greek economy.